Welcome to Thursday Thoughts, your weekly dose of real, honest conversation on all things personal growth. These are the chats Lucy and I love having every week over on Instagram. They're unfiltered, unedited, and always rooted in practical tools and a dose of inspiration. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts, which Polly and I are doing off of Instagram and on Zoom, which is kind of good in a way, not least because the sound quality is better. And there are various reasons why we need to do it. We need to get a couple in the can that we can't do on Instagram Live. So here we are. And basically today we are talking about beginner's mindset. And I guess this is kind of the difference between having a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, because I think so often we are put off doing something or trying something because we don't know what the hell we're doing because we've never done it before. And I think what we sort of forget sometimes is that anyone who has done anything ever, anyone who's successful at anything at all in their life, they started from knowing absolutely sweet fuck all. But I think we hold ourselves back because we're like, oh, but I don't know how to do that. And I've never done that before. But that's the whole point. It's like, that is how we learn. So I think having a kind of a beginner's mindset is a really good thing to cultivate. And I'm sure some of you, Polly, I'm sure you've read this book. I think we've talked about it on here before, is Mindset by Carol Dweck, which I found a really heavy read. We did it in my Thrive Solo book club, and it's excellent in that it's just packed full of really interesting research about the difference between having a fixed mindset and having a growth mindset. But it's quite dry. I found it quite a challenging read. But also very insightful and very interesting. And essentially what Carol Dweck found was that sort of some people have a growth mindset and what a growth mindset essentially means is, like, if you have a growth mindset, you believe that you can learn something. You believe that you can, you don't think, well, I've always been shit at this and therefore I can never do it. You think, well, I can learn and I can change and I can grow. Whereas if you have a fixed mindset, you very much think, well, this is who I am. This is how I am. This is what I do. This is what I don't do. This is how I think. This is how I don't think. And you're not really open to growth in the same way you are if you have a growth mindset. So yes, that is kind of what we're here to talk about today. And I think it's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yes. Well, talking about this really makes me think back to my teacher days, because we had shitloads of training about this to try and encourage the kids that we were teaching to have growth mindsets, because far too early in our lives, I think it's this kind of comparing yourself against somebody else. We think, well, that person is very good at that, so that means I need to be really, really good at that. So if I'm not good like them, then that's just the way it is, and I'm a failure and I've failed. So instead, what we've got to try and nurture is the fact that we can't all be good at something straight away. We have to put some effort in to become good at the thing, and to believe that you can become good at the thing through practice, through failing. Failing is absolutely fundamental in order to grow and learn something new. Nobody gets good at something without getting stuff wrong. It's virtually impossible. You learn by getting the stuff wrong. And I think, when I was teaching, I would say to the children, I'm going to be really upset if I see a full page of ticks down your page. I need to see things wrong and then see how you figured out when you got it wrong. That is how I know that you're learning. And that really is something we've got to really try and embrace with life. It's like, try and, things need to feel challenging. And if it feels too easy, it's boring as well. You don't get that sense of satisfaction afterwards of that you've achieved something, that you've actually grown. We feel great when we've overcome a challenge or a hurdle. And it's like, yes, you really do feel worthy of a great celebration afterwards. So we need to really remember that always, that we can't, it's weird if you're naturally good at something straight away. Lots of people do have natural talents, and some people find things easier than others, and that's just life. And some people, my family is a really good example of this. my two younger children are constantly saying, "Oh well, that older brother, he got all the brains. What's so unfair? Why didn't we?" Because he's naturally book smart, but and they're not naturally book smart, but they're so good at other things. And so I always say to them, "But you're brilliant at so many other things, which he's not so brilliant at. So don't compare yourself to him." And anyway, you have to in that sort of work that he's doing so easily, you can do it too. You just have to work a little bit harder
Mm.
at it. So it's just believing that you can do it.
Totally. Also, speaking of like sort of innate talents, well, the interesting thing is that, ultimately talent will only get you so far if you're
Mm,
not willing to put in the work.
yeah.
Like, it really doesn't matter how talented you are. In fact, funny enough, I was talking to one of my nephews about this because one of my nephews is his thing is music. He is hugely talented. He's an amazing musician. He's been in various bands. I mean, I personally believe that he could make it if he wanted to.
Oh,
Like, I
exciting.
really, I have no doubt in my mind. But he was staying here for the last couple of days actually, and I was literally having a conversation with him saying, if this is actually what you want to do with your life, I have no doubt that you can do this. But I tell you something, you have no lack of talent. The only thing that will stop you is if you don't believe that you can do it and you don't keep
Mm,
going until it
true. Yeah.
happens. It's like you got the talent. That is there is no argument about that. There is no question of that. But again, talent is not is not always enough to get you to where you want to go. But going back to the whole kind of beginner's mindset, I think one other thing that I just wanted to remember to say is that people, if you think about it, people who always think they know everything are the people who just know the least. And actually, if you look at the coolest people out there, really successful people, they are always learning, asking questions, wanting to be the quote stupidest person in the room in order to keep learning. And I think this is one thing that's worth thinking about and talking about in the context of this conversation and in the context of beginner's mindset. It's very much, I think, almost putting your ego aside and being like, I am okay being the person in this room who doesn't know anything about what these people are talking about. It's like, if you're always like, oh, well, like, you, yeah, and I'm sure we all do. I certainly do this before. I've done it where someone says something and I'm like, I know, I know. If you hear yourself saying that, I know, I know, I know, really question that because so often we fucking don't. There is so much that we don't know. And I think when we think we know everything about something, that's such a red flag. And really, like, the world belongs to the people who are willing to just be constant beginners and constantly asking questions and constantly open to learning new things. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it's asking questions. Because there are there are those people who are constantly asking questions, and as you say, they're normally probably the most successful person in the room, and they're just the most interesting. And it actually sometimes it's hard to get them to not ask a question and find out about them. But that it's that sort of willingness to just want to discover more about stuff you don't know about and that willingness to look a bit stupid. It's like not worrying what people think. We all that's one of the big things, being prepared to go, okay, I might look stupid if I ask this question because I don't know the answer, or willing to look stupid if I say this thing or whatever it might be. But it requires a level of vulnerability in a way of just going, okay, I don't know everything. And I'm absolutely okay with that. And I think that is really freeing
Yeah.
to admit that I don't know everything and admit that you're wrong sometimes. You might say something and you're wrong and and not to look stupid. And actually it's almost like, your goal could be, um, I'm just going to ask as many questions as I possibly can and learn from this
Mm,
rather than try and be the know-it-all and pretend that I know something rather than just admitting that I don't know, which I have been so guilty of many times,
same.
pretending that I know something because otherwise I'm so worried that I'm going to look like such a thickie.
We've all done it though,
Yes,
haven't we?
exactly. Yes.
We have all done it. But actually, it's funny because I always really admire people who go, actually, I don't know what you mean. I don't, or things like, oh, have you heard of blah, 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 so and so book? Actually, no, I haven't. I've never heard of that person. I don't know who the fuck you're talking about. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
actually it's such an admirable quality that someone has the guts to admit that they don't know something. And also, it's worth bearing in mind that the most interesting people are the ones who are actually the most interested. You
Mm,
know, we find people interesting when they are interested and not the ones who are the know-it-alls and who are constantly talking. And it's like, I think you and I have done an episode before about we've got, we have two ears and one mouth for a reason.
yeah.
We're supposed to listen more, and I'm saying this to myself as well. We should aim to listen more than we talk. And I think it's certainly something that I need to work on. And I think many of us need to work on that because it's like, yeah, the most interesting people are the ones that are the most interested. So make sure that you are asking questions, because
And
ultimately,
also,
like this, like learning is endless. It is
mm,
endless, you know?
and also, it's a really good thing to remember if you're in a social situation and you're feeling a little bit awkward or a bit shy, or, one of those horrible situations where you don't really know the people that well, it's such a brilliant thing to just this is what I've really started doing, is just go armed with questions.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really, just to try and find out interesting things about people, maybe not the usual boring stuff, but just go with questions which are going to spark some sort of conversation. My husband, is like a master of this. He is very, very good at just getting straight and missing out all the bullshit small talk and just kind of getting into some really good juicy stuff because he asks good questions. And I'm not so good at it, but I'm trying to just do more of that because it's actually so much more interesting than talking about yourself, I
Oh my
think. So
God, totally. The most dull questions are so what do you do? So,
yeah.
it's just those classic questions. It's funny because on my podcast, I've started relatively recently that one of the last questions that I ask guests is what are you most excited about? And actually, I think that is such a great
Yes, that is a
question to
good
ask
question.
people. If you are in a group of people you don't know, if you're at a party and you're meeting people, don't say, what do you do for a living? Or are you in a relationship? Or how many children do you have? Those
Mm.
usual boring questions that everybody asks all the time. Ask people, what are you most excited about in your life at the moment? Like, that's the kind of question that's going to elicit a really interesting conversation. And
Mm.
who knows where that might go, and I would want to be asked that. I'd much rather be asked that than oh, where do you live, what do you do, blah, blah, blah. And again, look, I've been as guilty as anyone else of asking the boring standard traditional questions. Of course we all have, but as I say, it's kind of something I've relatively recently started asking at one of the final questions when I am interviewing a guest for the podcast. What are you most excited about? And it's funny because I think it always makes people really kind of stop and think, you
Mm.
know, and also that we're going off on all sorts of tangents today, but that is a question worth asking yourself. If you cannot answer that question quite quickly and quite easily, why the fuck not? Because we should always have something that we're really excited about in our lives. And if you don't, if that question would stump you, then you might want to investigate that a little bit.
Yeah, love it. Well, I think that might be a good place to stop, Lucy. I love
I'm
that
not sure
so
that this has
much.
been about beginner's mindset. I think it's just been about a
Well,
little bit of everything, but
I think it has, but when it's about, I think ultimately it's about just being prepared to fail, being prepared to feel okay about not being an expert, and asking questions, being curious, like remove the judgment from yourself, and just be curious instead. Ask questions, and
yeah.
that's going to really help you just keep that mindset to help you grow and change, because otherwise you're literally fixed and staying where you are, and it's tedious and boring and you're
Yeah.
stuck in autopilot.
Yeah, totally. Well, thanks for listening. We hope this has been useful or helpful or interesting in some way. And we'll be back next Thursday with more Thursday thoughts.
Yay.
See you later, love.
Bye.
Bye.